folks, grab a seat and pour your drink neat. It's Whiskers and Whiskeys presents. We actually didn't talk about this in the pre-show. I have no idea what we want to call this. Maybe just realignment. Gosh, it's preseason right now. We're talking about realignment stuff. I don't know, like dream shattered. I don't know. Not making the cut. The Pac-4 saga
presents a changing landscape.
A changing landscape. There we go. So it's Mike here with DJ, and we are talking, as you may have guessed, about all of the crazy news that has happened over the college football landscape over the past I guess the past 10 days, really. That was August 3rd is when a lot of this stuff kind of went down, and then August 4th really hit the fan. So we're going to be talking about everything that happened with the Pac, the Big 12, the Big 10, the ACC, and what it means for college football overall. I think we wanted to both wait to do this to see if anything else would shake out here. It doesn't seem like that there's going to be any immediate changes, but who knows? I mean, we could wake up tomorrow and have a whole other thing going on. So we feel like the dust is somewhat settled right now.
Somewhat. But all I can say is we're back.
We are back.
We are so back. And it is something where we felt like we just had to address this. We have other planned things down the line here, and this was kind of an unplanned podcast episode, but it's just perfect timing because we can just start off our college football season. I mean, we're back. I am so pumped. This is arguably the most excited I've been for college football. I've prepared and done a ton of research, which I should have done years ago, because now it's just gotten me even more and more excited for what's to come.
Yeah, I mean, this is the fun thing about fun, I guess. Yeah, I would say fun from the outside for the student athletes, maybe not so much, but for the observer, you don't get this in other sports, man. You don't get this kind of craziness that happens. But before we dive into it in earnest, how you been, pal?
I've been great. It's closing down the end of summer here, which is great because it's hot as balls here in Virginia. It's been brutal.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to some fall weather. But yeah, no, you got all the summer traveling out of the way, and you're just starting to settle in because I mean, I can confidently say for the next few months here, my Saturdays and Sundays are going to be booked.
Booked solid. Solid. Yeah.
How's your summer been?
Good, man. Good. I'm off work this week because my daughter's starting daycare this week. Today was the first day. It went well. She did really well, according to everyone. No tears, which is good. They kind of just sat her on the mat, and she was so absorbed in other things that we just walked out. She didn't even see us leave, so that was nice. I did a bunch of stuff around the house. I replaced the kitchen faucet, cleaned out the garage. So when you talk about how hot it is outside, I was feeling that. I'm absolutely zonked this evening, but I got a nice Stone Cold's beer, Broken Skull IPA from El Segundo Brewery. Swig of beer.
And I got myself a nice little bumbleberry.
That's delicious.
Trying to finish off my summer beer before the fall stuff hits the fridge. So
there you go. I did pick up some. I didn't pick up any fall stuff except for a German beer from Caboose. They have a German beer called Das Gut. So I don't know if that's supposed to be Oktoberfest related or what, but it just a German style Pilsner, I think. But so I'm excited to try that. I've been watching a lot of good movies, man. We watched I think I told you when I went to California, at the end of June, I watched Creed 3, which stunk, and John Wick 4, which was great on the ride out. And on the ride back, I watched Bullet Train and Gray Man, which were both really good. And then this weekend we watched They Cloned Tyrone on Netflix, which was awesome. It's like a sci-fi comedy. Very, very, very great cast too. John Boyega, Jamie Foxx, and the woman who plays Photon in in Marvel in the Marvel. That's her name, right? Photon.
Yeah, well, we don't know yet, but I think so.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know what the actress's name is. Now you say that.
yeah. It's escaping me, but they were all really good. It was funny too. It was suspenseful. It was funny. It was good. And then we started Extraction 2 last night, which we got through like maybe the first 40 minutes of the movie, which includes a 20-minute one take scene, which is like like edge of my seat, incredible, including one of the most gruesome, not a kill shot, but lead up to a kill shot I've ever seen. Like spoilers, but not spoilers. Like the Spock live long and prosper is all I'll say. And then when you watch the movie, like I literally like sat up. I was like, oh, I don't like that. Don't like that one bit. So, but it's great, man. It was really, really enjoyable. So far, gotta watch the rest of it. But
So far, gotta love. Tell me you have a young kid without telling me you have a young kid is when you've started a movie but have not finished it quite
I
yet.
know it's so well. Also, like my in-laws were here, so like and Kara doesn't like to stay up that late either. But like,
Yeah,
it was yeah, it
I
was
know. I feel you.
it
I've
took us.
watched plenty of movies and shows by myself with
This was
my
the first time it took me
early
three
bedtimer.
tries to get through a movie with They Clone Tyrone. Three
Yeah.
tries to get through the movie, and we found I was like, we had to stop with like 20 minutes left. I'm like, come on, we're at the climax here. Like, I don't care that she's up from her nap. Let her hang out.
Let her hang out. No, I feel you.
Oh.
All right, so why don't I'm going to give everyone a little bit of a preview on what to expect out of us in the coming weeks and months, and then we'll get right into the realignment. So, like we mentioned, we're back, and this year we have decided that we are going to, probably in an effort to one, better our college betting I don't know, process and knowledge.
Prospects, yeah, probably not
Right.
gonna matter, but we'll
um
give it a shot.
We are. So we're going to bring that back this year. We're super excited, but we are also going to do a full college football preview episode that is going to come to you all next week. And it is going to be incredible. What we're going to do is we made it into a little bit of a competition between the two of us. So we're going to, as long as we can do this for this last year, go through and decide or give our choices, our picks on who's going to be in the conference championships for each of the Power Five conferences. Again, while we still have five.
Yeah.
And then we are going to, from there, decide who we think is going to be in the playoff, and then who's going to be in the national championship, and then who's going to win it all. But each piece of that puzzle is going to be we're going to put like a point system to it, similar to March Madness. So if we got the conference championship participants correct, that's a point. If we pick the champion correctly, that's 2. If we got a playoff team, if we pick the right playoff team, that's 4 points. The right teams in the national championship game is 8, and then the champion is 16. And we're going to see how we did, and we'll give an update sometime in the middle of the season to see kind of where we're at, if we're already dead in some areas, or if we're looking good. And then after conference championship week, we will, and when we know the playoff, we'll give another update, and then probably a nice little, hopefully celebratory for one of us. Hopefully it's not horrific, and we're just like one of us wins by default.
I mean,
For the champion.
I don't know, dude. Like, I mean, I feel like so I've made it through 2 conferences completely, and then I've started a third, and I just feel like I feel like we're gonna have a lot of overlap. Like, I know that you said you're gonna have some picks that are gonna surprise me, but like at least the 2 conferences I went through, I'm like, I don't know, like I'm like, I don't know who else I would pick. It's like it's so like when you look at some teams are just like, there's a couple teams they're just so complete. And then you look at the rest of the conference and it's like, yikes. Like, and granted, a lot can happen. There's transfer portal, like, anything a lot of coaching changes. So like anything could happen. but like a lot of things have to go right and a lot of things have to go wrong to prevent some teams from just being completely dominant. And even if stuff goes wrong for some of like the powerhouses, it's like, well, it's plug and play for some of these schools, like, I mean, I'll just say it, like Ohio State, like for things to not go well for them, it's like they can plug and play. Whereas, other schools, if, uh, we won't get too much into it. We'll save that. We will save that for Sunday. So,
I will be shocked, especially when it comes to the playoff teams, which I can honestly tell you I've already been through all 5 of my conferences and have tinkered. I feel like fantasy football, tinkered with who's going to actually make it out. Not necessarily the champions. I don't think the champions are probably going to be surprising, but
yeah.
but the second team in that conference championship. But what's really been hard is I have a few playoff contenders that are playing each other, so you really have to like, in order to make that logical choice and explanation on who's going to be in the playoff, you're going to have to really think through who's going to win
Yeah.
those deciding games. So I feel
Yeah.
like I've had trouble getting to my final playoff 4
Well, yeah,
because
because you get so much depends on other people, right?
uh-huh.
Because like Ohio State, for example, if they were to finish second in the East, well, they could be in the playoffs
Hmm.
or they
Like
might
last
not
year.
be. Yeah, right, right. I mean, it just that fourth spot. I feel like in this case, it's like the first 2 or 3 spots in the playoffs should be pretty simple. Like assuming things go a certain way. But then that third and fourth spot, it's always like like I'm not like the SEC and the Big Ten champion will be in the playoff, right? But then it's like who else? Yeah, there's so much that depends on it, right? So we'll
Yeah, I
see.
mean they're definitely my 5. I probably have 5, 6, definitely 5 and 6 that are I in my prediction as of now are going to be considered snubs in a sense, like where they have an argument, and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be picking and choosing, the
Yeah.
committee's gonna have to do, and potentially a 7 depending on how I think through it. But it was just, I don't know, some of these I was going through and I was really trying to, even some of these conferences where I think they're pretty evenly matched and there's a few schools that can make it to the championship game. It's like you to make it logically make sense, I had to like actually break down, okay, well, if I'm going to say they're going to win here, then that team has to lose there. And
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know, it was one of
Yeah.
those things where I got to a couple of them and I was like, this is complicated but fun.
Yeah.
Super excited for that. And then we are going to go directly from that into the college football season, and that means Tales of the Trophy season 3. We're already 3 years in.
We probably should have. I know that we picked the Big 12 for a reason, but in hindsight, we probably should have picked the Pac. Probably going to be real interesting doing them next year at a conference that no longer exists. So
Well, I mean, we addressed this realignment, so this is really an update for us because we addressed it when we first heard the news of USC and UCLA joining the Big
yeah,
Ten,
yeah.
and I think we both thought that of the other big conferences, it would have been the Big 12 that dies, and
I mean,
we
for here, this brings up one of the quotes I wanted to share because I think that this is if we're gonna dive into it, I think that this is a good way to set the table here. So hold on
let's.
1 second. Let me
No, you're fine. You pull that, and I'll keep talking about our lineup here. So
go
we
for it.
have college football playoff preview, or just college football preview is coming this next week after we drop this episode, and then directly after that we get into our typical Tales of the Trophies, which is going to be the Big 12, as we're going to focus on that and go through the various trophies. There's some really, really fun ones, some well-known ones, and some that aren't as well known that are pretty cool as well. And we might even sprinkle in some more of our home field advantage and our guide. We have a couple more cities that we're looking to complete over the next couple months. So reckon it with the crew. We'll also likely have an episode or two this football season as well. So got a lot coming down the pike here. We're actually fastly approaching definitely 50 episodes. Close to, we're gonna hit 100 before you know it. I was
Oh
actually
yeah.
updating our website, and I had had numbered just the episodes starting from the very beginning, even through all the other series, just all together, and we're getting up there. So very exciting. But anyway, all right, let's get into conference realignment.
All right, so I actually can't find the tweet that I wanted to share, but there was, I think that we can just kind of take our minds back a couple of years ago. Like the pack made some moves, several years ago when they added in Utah and they went up to 14 teams. And it was like, wow, like the pack of all conferences could be, the one to first, could be the first super conference. Like they could get to 16 teams before anyone else, which was, I think, surprising for all of us. And the Big 12 looked dead. The pack had also taken, I think they took Colorado during that time too, right? So yeah, they were expanding, and it was like, wow, like they have a very rich TV deal. Things were looking really, really good for the Pac-12. And then, over the past couple of years here, things have started to fall apart a little bit. And as we talked about, USC and UCLA decide that they're going to ship off to the Big Ten, leaving 10 teams in the Pac-12. So this all really starts at the end of July when Deion Sanders, a new coach of the Colorado Buffs, decide, hey, you know what? We're heading back to the Big 12, right? Which takes us to the evening of August 3rd. At that time, Colorado was already leaving for the Big 10 or the Big 12. That was a done deal, right? And then that evening, there were reports from Brett McMurphy and Pete Thamel were the two that were really on top of everything, saying, that there's been a bunch of indications that Washington, Oregon were heading to the Big Ten. And that was pretty much, a done deal. Like it was going to happen shortly. These guys are gone. So now you have USC and UCLA and Washington and Oregon heading to the Big Ten. And there were also some reports that evening that Arizona was also preparing to leave for the Big 12. So now you have 10 teams going down to 6. Well, actually 9 teams, because Colorado already announced they were leaving. So on the evening of August 3rd, Washington, Oregon to the Big 10. Arizona is prepping to leave for the Big 12. You're looking at 6 teams now in your conference. Well, then the old Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend, happened on the morning of August 4th. And that week was a hell of a week for me. It was quite a week at work, like one of the most stressful and somewhat disappointing weeks I've had. And, this news that was coming out in the morning really helped to kind of shift my attention a little bit, brought a lot of spark to my day. So the first tweet came in, or I don't know, what do you call it now? It's not a tweet, it's X now.
I'm stuck on a tweet.
Fair enough. So at 9:45 a.m. Eastern time on August 4th, Brett McMurphy reported at last minute, Pac-12 may stay together and sign grant of rights. After Monday's media rights offer, the Pac-12 held multiple Zoom meetings this week. Arizona's Bobby Robbins appeared fully committed to Pac-12, so much that one participant said, if Arizona leaves, he should win an Oscar. Same Arizona, the 12 hours prior to that, they were saying it was a sure thing they were heading to the Big 12. Ross Dellinger said an important part of this, the reluctance from Pac-12 schools and the blame that may follow to kill a 108-year-old conference. Another factor, the pushback from the Big Ten's powerhouse programs and further expansion, something they had been against. So, it was seeming like in the morning there, that, the Board of Regents for the Pac, we're going to sign a grant of rights for TV deals. And even there was some conversation that based on this deal, Oregon and Washington may stick around. And the deal was specifically with Apple. So Apple TV was going to, pay money to host the Pac-12 network and everything. It's looking like there's new life now into the Pac conference, and they may again stick around and survive. Then around 10 a.m., as all of this was going on, news came in that Florida State, and let me get the tweet up, post, whatever, for specifics on this. Florida State University is working with JP Morgan Chase to explore how the school's athletic department could raise capital from institutional funds such as private equity. Why would they want to raise funds? Well, for their buyout, so they could buy out their contract in the ACC and head to, I don't know, a conference that, you know, is competing with Southern schools and would like to get into that Florida TV market, maybe the Big Ten. So it's seeming like, oh, wow. So now the Pac-12 might be sticking around, and Florida State might be trying to buy out their contract, that's going to be very important as it relates to as this story develops. The Florida State is actively interested in getting out of the ACC, so much so that they're going to get funding from JP Morgan Chase, which is the first. Like, that has never happened in the history of college football. And then, much regrettably, around 11 a.m. Eastern time, just as quickly as they had risen from the dead, the Pac-12 was dead again. It was announced officially that Washington and Oregon are leaving and that they are for sure heading to the Big Ten, and that Arizona is, in fact, heading to the Big 12. And then shortly after that, around in the middle of the afternoon, there were reports that, from Brett McMurphy, that Arizona State and Utah are showing interest in the Big 12. And hat tip to the Reddit college football page on Twitter. Lots of funny tweets and memes and stuff coming out of them. Like in regards to this, the Arizona State and Utah are showing interest in the Big 12. They tweeted, "Man stranded in the desert showing interest in a glass of water." There's some good tweets like ideas for new Big Ten rivalries. Washington and Maryland, Dungeness versus Blue Crab Bowl. Oregon, Washington, Wisconsin, Ohio State. What's this cup? And Michigan and Oregon, the traumatic postseason losses to TCU support group. And maybe one of my favorite tweets of all, it took us almost 30 years, but now we have incontrovertible evidence that Biggie killed Pac. Get it? The Big Ten killed Pac, Tupac. Yeah. And then one of the most amazing things out of all this is that, I don't know if you saw this, one of the Oregon regents took the Zoom call from the golf course.
Yeah.
Which is just, I mean, that just goes to show, right? But then it was ultimately reported. So, you know, keep in mind where we're at. So what started as the Pac-9, who in the morning thought that there was new life. You know, I think everyone in the Pac on the Board of Regents woke up in the morning feeling like, all right, us 9 teams, we're going to get this TV deal done with Apple. We're going to save our conference. It's going to be great. Well, just a few short hours later, it's 6:01 p.m. Eastern time. Washington, Oregon have already been announced that they're heading to the Big Ten. So that takes you down to 7. And then Arizona State, and Utah announced that they would be joining the Big 12 in 2024. So at this point now, and it was formally announced at 9:30 p.m. that Arizona State, and Utah are all joining the Big 12. Also known as the Big Vibes Conference, or the Big Vibes Only Conference, which I think it is going to be a fun-looking conference. And now we have 4 teams. And there was a good tweet by Ralph Russo. I can add there was numbness in the Big 12 late last night, too. Tons of work to get planned inside the 5-yard line, and officials in that conference very much thought it was going to fall apart. Then it was back on. It sure was. So that's a summary of all of the drama that happened on August 4th. Some other things have transpired in the coming days about the Pac-4, including a great website, pac4.com, where some of the teams that you're familiar with will play. That's their tagline. It's obviously a parody site. And some other things about the future of Stanford, Cal, Washington State, and Oregon State. But, you know, EJ, your thoughts on all the craziness as it was happening in real time?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty balls deep into this this entire situation, just trying to understand what the different variables were. And honestly, it was just like a signal to me, you know, summer's ending, it's time for college football. So I was already kind of changing my mindset out of the summer into the fall anyway. But This really just comes down to dollars and cents, and that's what everything. The college football, I'm torn in this overall. Like, I love the idea of having conference games with like some more intriguing matchups because they're conference foes that the schools wouldn't have scheduled or haven't been scheduling non-conference anyway. But you do really lose a lot of the geographical rivalries, and some of which are pretty heated. And that's the whole reason why we created this podcast in the first place, was because we love these rivalries, these trophies,
Yeah.
even if they're not nationally known, they're regionally known. So to lose some of these big ones, stink. But
Yeah.
you just really hope that um, that some of these teams will become rivals, probably a lot less like regionally like they do traditionally in college football, but maybe more of like an NFL style where, a couple of good teams play each other a couple of times for meaningful, games. You're bound to get a rivalry, right? Like you have like
Hmm.
Kansas City and Cincinnati. Like that's not a rivalry in the NFL. Buffalo and either of those teams aren't, but they're becoming them because they have to beat each other to get to that final game. So I'm hoping that will at least spur, some of these really competitive teams joining these other conferences, whether it's Texas and Oklahoma or UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington. But hopefully there becomes these rivalries because, just a couple of good teams playing each other annually and needing to win. I'm hoping that at least comes of this,
Yeah.
because we are going to lose some cool
Oh
regional
yeah.
rivalries.
Well, I mean, Washington and Washington State said they're going to continue to play the Apple Cup, right? And I'm sure that the Civil War or bow for the Platypus Trophy or whatever you want to call it, it was going to persist in some way, shape, or form. Like, yeah,
It
certainly.
de-
Like,
it depends. Oregon State kind of already was playing
well,
that
that
game of like, screw
yeah,
you guys,
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I
but
think
I
that
think they will.
regionality will in some senses stick around, and like that certainly is a piece of it that sucks to lose. But like also like I mean, let's like I want to go back to something you said. Like it's not like these conferences are adding these teams because of like, oh yeah, Oregon and Washington are really going to add to the pedigree of the Big Ten conference. Like it's all about TV dollars. Like that is all this is coming down to. And like my biggest thing is like the NCAA is such a joke, man, because like this governing board that like is claims to uphold the sanctity of college athletics. Like, where are you guys? Like, what are you doing in these types of situations to prevent these types of things from happening? Because there's no way that any argument could be made that like, oh yeah, we're doing what's best for the competitive nature of the sport. It's a bunch of bull crap, man.
Yeah.
Like, quit shaking down like student athletes for like smoking weed and like petty stuff like that. Like, do something about this. Like, this is something that you should be putting your energy and effort into instead of shaking down these kids.
I
So
mean, I can tell you who killed college football. It's been dead. This we've been on this path, and I think it's been a pretty evident that this day would come. Uh, but when you listen to some of these numbers, you're gonna understand. Like it makes 100% like sense why these schools are doing what they're doing. But Jim Delaney, the old Big Ten commissioner, killed college football the second they added Rutgers and Maryland to the Big Ten, because that was really like adding Penn State wasn't really a money play per se, but it was getting that independent school that had pedigree, was still regionally. I know that was,
I mean,
pretty far
Penn
east.
State's a blue blood. Like when you look at Penn State as a program, they're a blue blood for
Oh no,
sure.
for sure. Yeah, but it wasn't like with a particular TV deal in mind, right?
Oh
And
yeah, yeah,
even
right.
Nebraska was much more of a, and I bet you they wish they didn't do this now, was more of a football play, right? Like, oh, we get Nebraska.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
not only did they lose their membership to like the Association of American Universities, which is, I don't know, this, bougie accreditation that, the schools act like they care about. But they've been terrible at football. But the introduction of DC's market and New York City's market into the Big Ten for the TV deal skyrocketed, because you have the SEC that's making a ton of money, but a lot of that money isn't based on TV markets, because there isn't any in
Mm-hmm.
the SEC, right? Atlanta, and even that they have to probably split with the ACC because Georgia Tech's in downtown, and obviously Athens is outside the city. So, but they get all their money because it's football, right? There's so much money spent on football in the South. The Big Ten is making all of their money because of the TV markets they have. So not only do they have, I think what is it, 4 out of the top 6 media markets in the nation, between Los Angeles, New York City, Washington D.C., Chicago. That's probably the top ones. I was actually just looking at this list the other day, just trying to figure this out.
Of
But
course you would.
I just wanted to figure it out. But
Yeah.
then adding a Los Angeles, then that's the finishes it, right? Then that's like 6 out of the 8. It's
Yeah.
insane. But when you look at the dollars and cents, so the Big Ten with their new market, so ESPN is now with the SEC, or they were with the SEC, right? They still have the
Yeah.
rights. And then it's Fox, CBS, and NBC are the ones that just bought the TV deal for the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
And that cost now is going to, or that money is going to give in this next TV contract. I think it's about a decade. I think it's through 2030. Each Big Ten school is going to get, just for being in the conference, just being a part of it, doesn't matter what you do, $80 to $100 million a year.
That's
That's
crazy.
Like, once they get fully into the LA market, it'll end up being 100 towards the end, right? So with that in mind, here's what the other numbers look like. And this starts to kind of become crystal clear on why these schools did what they did. So obviously the Big Ten grabbed the LA market to make that number what it was. And that's really all they wanted to do. Now, they'll play that blame game of, oh, we didn't kill the Pac-12, but you did, right? You took Los Angeles.
You did. Somebody's gonna die. Yeah.
So they were very reluctant to give the death blow of Oregon and Washington, because, like, truthfully, I mean, Oregon, Portland doesn't really have much of a market, I mean,
Right.
relative to the other ones. And Seattle's more of your 13th on the list, believe it or not. So it's not super huge. So that really wasn't.
13 seems high to me, to be honest. I feel like I could name 12 other cities that have a higher TV market than Seattle, but
yeah. But it's just like, when it comes down to that, it got to a point where, once the Pac-12 decided it was going to blow itself up, essentially, and that just meant it couldn't come to an agreement on the TV deal, that's when, like, the Big Ten was like, we know this is going to happen. Why don't we get the schools we want in conference, right? But if you look at the numbers, so you have the Big Ten's about 80 to 100 million dollars, depending. I'm not exactly sure. Obviously now the number is a little in flux because they added more schools and you have to share it. But the Big 12 was about 31.7 million a year. So much lower than that,
right.
But still fine. And the Pac-12's deal with Apple TV was only going to be about 21 million a year for schools. So when you're looking down the barrel of, like, do I stay here for 100 years tradition for 21 million, or do I go to the Big Ten where I can earn, actually, it's really interesting because they can't earn it in this that much in this first one, but at least they're going to be a part of future conversations. Like, it makes complete sense. And actually, it's the Big Ten and the SEC that screwed the Pac-12 more broadly, because no other streaming or major network wanted to even bid on the Pac-12. So they were screwed. Like, ESPN was not coming in. NBC.
Well, so they did in 2021. I saw a tweet in 2021. Earlier, ESPN offered, and the Pac-12 said, like, I don't know. They countered with something ridiculous, and ESPN's like, okay, bye. Sounds good. I forget the exact numbers, but, like,
I think it was like 30 or so.
Yeah.
And they kind of like, turned their head to it, their nose to it. But you look at that, and then so it just made sense, right? So that made the Colorado leaving, and especially Arizona and them doing that, they knew, right? And they knew that TV deal had to be spectacular to keep them. And the second it wasn't, they had already had their contingencies, because you know what you don't want to be? Last. And now you have these
Yeah.
4 remaining schools and no one wants them. And I mean, it sucks for them, but
Well, yeah,
it's just all
it's
about money.
yeah, and that's where it gets interesting too about no one wants them. Like that kind of goes into well, it's foreshadowing is that like Cal and Stanford like makes really good sense in the ACC. Like you do get the San Francisco TV market, which is nice, but like also just when you think about the ACC and like academics, like Cal and Stanford fit the mold there, right? But you have a couple. They haven't said specifically who's holding up, I don't think. But
No, they have.
oh,
There's
did
3.
they come out and say Florida
Uh-huh.
State and Clemson?
And one more.
Well,
Because they need those. They need at least 2 of those 3 to flip, which isn't going to
I
happen.
mean, which
And we
is
can get
well,
into
which
that.
is ridiculous, and because if you look at the pack, like they almost became the Pac 16, but USC and UCLA are like, not happening, and then they bounced a couple years later. Now the ACC could bring in Cal and Stanford, Florida State, who is actively pursuing funding from a private equity firm to like purchase their buyout is like, nah, not happening. And then Clemson, who doesn't give a damn about the ACC, except for, when they didn't have a home for college football, is saying, not going to happen. And like, the same thing could be happening to the ACC, but at the same time, like, given where the pack was a couple of years ago, like it really was not that long ago when they brought in all these teams and made big moves. Like this could happen to anybody. Like perhaps not the Big Ten because of like all the money that they have, but I think everyone
Nope.
else should be a little bit nervous.
I think the
Yeah,
SEC also has a good amount of money. I can't remember exactly. I think they're hovering
yeah,
around like the 60 to 80 million, I
I'm
want to
sure.
say.
I'm sure
Yeah.
they do have a good. I mean, yeah, because like just especially now with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, right? But like, who's to say they couldn't? Like, what really is interesting? I'll pull this up here. This would look kind of interesting. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is what it would look like if the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac 4 all became a conference. This is something I'd watch. Like, what if they decide to become the first super conference, right? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 32 teams, and you have the regionality built in. You got pods of 4. Like that's kind of I'd watch this conference for sure. Like I'm excited about the Big 12 already. I think it's gonna be kind of neat. Like it's gonna be fun to watch. It's really, this is a compelling conference, I think, here. If you can this assumes, of course, you'll notice Florida State's not listed on here and Clemson's not listed on here. So this assumes they leave the conference. But I'd watch this. I'd watch this for sure.
I agree with you. I think this would be very interesting, and I'm really curious to see. I really don't think it'll just come down to the SEC and the Big Ten at the end. I think it'll end up at least having to be a third, if not really just trying to solidify the 4. But yeah, I mean, you just have Clemson and Florida State. The ACC, that's actually kind of the ironic thing, is their contract is by far the worst. It's
Oh yeah.
horrific. Not
Yeah.
only do the schools only make 17 million a year, but they also are locked into that contract through 2036
That's
unless
insane.
they can come up with $120 million buyout. So that
That's
is what
insane.
Florida State is looking to do. And honestly, because they're sick and tired of driving all the profits for schools like Boston College and Syracuse, like that are clearly not making any
Yeah.
money for the conference.
Yeah.
So they're sick of it. And yeah, I really think well before that 2036, I think you're going to see Florida State leave for the Big Ten, and then Clemson's going to, I don't know where they'll come up with the money, but they're going to look to try and get to the SEC.
For
And
sure.
then from there, who knows? Then it's going to be like, I don't know. The Big 12 is going to be so solid at that point. Like it might just be the ACC trying to pull a
I mean,
couple
this
more.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if this can happen, this and just I know that if folks, I assume we'll upload this to YouTube, but if folks are listening, so it's 8 regions, 8 pods, 4 teams in each pod. So you have Oregon State, Washington State, Cal, and Stanford. That's 1. 2 is Utah, BYU, Arizona, Arizona State. 3 is Colorado, Kansas, Kansas State, and Iowa State. 4 is Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. 5 is Houston, Miami, UCF, Georgia Tech. 6 is Wake Forest, UNC, NC State, Duke. 7 is Virginia, Virginia Tech, Cincinnati, Louisville. And then 8 is Pitt, West Virginia, Syracuse, and Boston College. That's a nice conference right there. And like that's something that like I feel like would work out for everyone. Like if you can find a way to make that scheduling happen, like that's a great TV market that has like compelling, like you can the things that you could do is that in having like the 4 teams that you play, yeah, you play everyone in your conference and then you swap things around. Like I think that would be a lot of fun in seeing how that plays out every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% right, but if I'm the TV market trying to get the deal done here, like I don't know how much I'm giving you compared to the other deals I've already given to the other conferences. Because I mean, when it comes to like dollars,
Well, look at the
who
TV markets you got. You got all of Texas. You've got San
but
Francisco.
it's not
You've
all
got
of Texas though,
Miami.
because
Well, I mean, but you're pretty well spread. You got Houston. You got
okay,
all of North Carolina.
you have a part of
You got
Houston,
Atlanta. You
a
got Atlanta
part
with
of
Georgia Tech.
Atlanta.
You got Boston. You got part of New York. Like that's a pretty
Yeah, but that's
compelling
not.
TV market there.
I mean, again, like if you're looking at by population, if I had to guess, there's probably only one media market here, like a full media market that is in the top 10, and that's Miami.
What
San
about Atlanta?
Francisco's, yeah, but that's again like
Houston?
how much are you splitting Houston with A&M, and how much are you splitting Georgia Tech? Because you know that the SEC owns Atlanta's rights and Georgia Tech's in Atlanta. So I would be curious to see what those splits are, because clearly there are some splits. That's not
Yeah,
just all
yeah.
for Virginia Tech, and it wouldn't be all for Houston. It's definitely A&M probably owns a lot of that, but it's
And
like,
Virginia Tech, you have like some DC in there too,
but
right?
not the
Like,
DC. That's the thing. I know it sounds, yes, I'm not disagreeing with you, but like it's not as appealing for ESPN to give these schools say 70 million a year. It wouldn't happen. Now, not to say
well,
they
no,
wouldn't
not
still do
70, not
okay,
70, but
but
like to stay alive,
well,
because like at the end of
yeah.
the day, all like other than, I mean, the ACC and the Pac obviously are fighting for their lives right now. Like the Big 12, I guess they could say they're good, but like it seems like that's a good way to get better.
I don't disagree, and I think those pods work really nice. But as college football has shown, like what makes sense doesn't always make sense, right?
Yeah.
So, no,
Well,
it's interesting because I don't know what the 4 are going to do, because they're only allowed 1 year until they can get to 8. They can't officially, so they'll be able to stay a conference next year. But it's like a temporary. I doubt they're going to get an
so in
automatic bid to the
2024, you're saying in 2024 they could stay as 4 teams.
4, but that's the only year they can still
Right.
technically be a part of Power 5 or whatever you want to call it. And I doubt they'll get an automatic bid to the playoff like they were supposed
No, no
to.
way.
So, but the problem is, I was already seeing articles like, okay, well, Mountain West, that makes sense, right? Problem
Yeah.
is, all those schools have like a $15 million buyout, and they can't afford to pay 8 schools $15 million to join.
You have to do
So
like a
it's like,
merger. The
right,
AAC said that they're interested too. Yeah, you
right.
have to do like a merger. Yeah.
And if you're them, then you just have to be really careful, because like you're probably not getting too many more chances. Like this is probably
No.
it. Now, can they get some nice schools between Boise and San Diego State, and I would take UNLV for the Vegas market, right? Like
Oh
if you
yeah.
start to think of things like that, like I think they can make it respectable-ish, but
Well,
you have to be
Cal's.
careful.
I mean, it makes the most sense for Cal and Stanford to stick together,
Yeah.
and for Oregon State and Washington State to stick together because, like, obviously Cal and Stanford, like, I mean, the Ivies could pick up Cal and Stanford,
Mhm.
like that would make a ton of sense for them.
Yeah.
But Cal's got to figure something out, man. They're like, with that new stadium, I think that I was reading that they're like $1 billion in debt with the new stadium that they built. And unfortunately, they lost the naming rights to the stadium because FTX was the name sponsor for that stadium, and that obviously has
That's
gone away.
yeah, that just sounds okay. When you're telling me like $1 billion for Cal football, that's your first mistake. And then your naming rights was
Dude,
FTX.
I think it was the fact. Well,
Jesus.
I mean, it was hot. Everyone was on the FTX train for a while there. I mean, like
Yeah.
that's if you when you finish this podcast, listeners, go ahead and like find someone that gives an overview of FTX if you haven't listened to it, because it's crazy the amount of people that were bought into that pyramid scheme with
Yeah.
just like crazy looking guy and his girlfriend who likes, dress up like orgies. Uh so that whole thing is crazy. Um I don't know, man. My biggest question out of all this, and like the thing, we talked about it sucks losing like the cool thing that we like about college football. I think that all true college football fans like is like the regionality is part of tradition, right? Like that's what we love. That's why we have this podcast. That's why we started it. Was the tradition associated with these rivalries. My biggest question mark is what the hell's gonna happen in the Rose Bowl? Because every year Pac-12 champion and Big Ten champion play in the Rose Bowl, and like
Well, not anymore.
imagine if Oregon State wins the Pac-12 this year. And go like, do they just bring knives to the Rose Bowl and just shank everyone in the Big Ten? Like, I mean, because that's like but what you do after this year, right? Like this is the last year realistically that you can have the Pack as the other team in the Rose Bowl. So who do you think should take over the Pack spot in the Rose Bowl?
Well, I don't I'll be interested to see kind of just what comes of any of that. I think those big bowl games, I don't think they're going to be what they how they've been structured, because they already have
Well,
broken that structure, right? Because they put all of these traditionally all these big bowl games, Orange Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, they all had like conference champion like spots
well,
for them.
even the small ones are aligned to a conference. Like the
Right.
Sun Bowl is a Pac one, Holiday Bowl is a Pac one. Like every bowl that is associated with the Pac
Yeah.
will be exploring new options for 2024. So
I just think what you're going to end up having, because they already took some of these big ones like the Rose Bowl and the Orange Bowl and put them into the playoff rotation. So once every 3 years, it's not the Big Ten and the Pac-12 anyway. So
well, but they
I
go somewhere else. They end up. I mean, they get assigned to another bowl.
yeah,
Like that's still that game is played. The Pac-12 and Big Ten, or if that champion goes to the playoff, then they don't. It's the runner-up that
but
plays.
see,
But
that's what I mean. I think it's just dead. I think the bowl thing, and I'm honestly, a part of me is okay with that, because right now, so you have the
really, you're
yeah.
okay with that?
I mean, the
Ah,
Rose Bowl hasn't been the Rose Bowl for forever. Yes, that used to be like the thing that big, especially Big Ten schools, just like
oh
that
man.
was the pinnacle. But that pinnacle's been dead since they've taken the Rose Bowl away from that, or they've had when you don't have the top school from one of those two conferences in it because that school's in the playoff or in the Big Ten champion or in the national championship. Like it just kind of took that away.
I
So now
don't
you're looking
know,
at,
dude. I don't know. I mean, I still feel like even in this era, we've had really good. Like the Rose Bowl game this past year was really good. Like
but it
I
was
feel like you have.
meaningless.
What do you mean it's meaningless? It's still a meaningful. How is it meaningless?
Because you have players not even playing, right? Because they're worried about their draft stock in a meaningless
Well,
game.
yeah.
So then that right there can kill you if you don't even have superstars playing, because it's not a playoff game. It's not a national championship. So I don't know. I think the shine has slowly started to come off of that. And now with the 12-team playoff, I mean, they're only going to play this format for one, I would guess probably 1 year before they change it. But next year they're going to do worst four teams get a bye, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 host a playoff game, which is awesome. I think that
Mhm.
should 1,000% be on campus. And then the next round will be bowls. Then the semis will be bowls, and the national championship will be, again,
So you're
a
saying it
site
doesn't matter
location.
because eventually the Rose Bowl, for example, will be one of the playoff spots, so it doesn't
Yes.
really matter.
It'll be a permanent. So what they're
Yeah.
already concerned about is if, say, I'm a Michigan fan next year and they make the playoff, say they'll make the playoff, the 12-team playoff, but we'll just in this example say that they got a bye, right? So they don't play the first week. So then the next quarterfinals, they play in, say, Phoenix at the Fiesta Bowl, and then they win. So then they have to play in Miami in the semifinals, and they win. And then the national championship is in Los Angeles. That is a lot of travel, a lot of money for all of those fans. And how many times are you going to do that, right? You're probably only going to be able to afford to do that once, let alone on an annual basis. So that's why they've talked seriously, and I think it's a no-brainer, is why are you going to punish the teams that get the bye from not being able to host a playoff game? So I think what you're going to have is, first round 5, 6, 7, 8 host, second round 1, 2, 3, 4 host, and then semis will be Rose Bowl, Orange Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, cotton or sugar, whatever Jerry Jones will wrestle over it, right? Or even the Fiesta Bowl will probably get kicked
Fiesta
off. Honestly,
Peach.
it'll end up being in New Orleans. Oh yeah, Peach, right? So they'll rotate those, and then the other one will get the national championship. And and I'm sure they'll have in the new stadiums like Vegas and LA, and they'll do, they'll still rotate those in. But I think that's just what we're looking at anyway. So I think the
Yeah,
furthering of those big name bowls are just going to continue to just be
and I
random
think it's
matchups.
well, I think it's a shame. I think like me personally too. Like I think four is good. I think four is a good number for the playoffs because like all this stuff of like, oh, well, if I'm a conference champion, like you have 13 weeks to prove why you should be in the playoff. Like I think four is plenty enough. Like I think that adding these extra games, like expanding to 12, like at first I was excited, but I kind of soured on it now. I think that like four is the right number. Like you have 13 weeks to prove why you should be, a certain team, like winning, be in the playoffs, be in the picture. Um, I think that it's punishing the teams that go out there and prove it every week and gives a shot to teams that like, kind of just slip by. Like, yeah, I mean, stuff happens. Like there's, games that like it does suck that if you lose two games, you just like, even if it's like a fluke situation, you kind of kiss it goodbye. But like at the same time, man, like you can't look at the four teams they're in there and say, well, they don't deserve to be here. I think that this past year's playoff kind of proves that. Like the fact that Georgia just dog walked TCU shows everything that you need to see about like why having a 12 team playoff really doesn't like it doesn't make that big of a deal. You're telling me that the 12 team, whoever that is worthy of playing the 5 team?
I mean,
Like,
don't tell Saban that though, because there's always going to be those arguments that happen with the BCS, right? Where you only put 2 in, and the question was, what if 3 or 4 would win the championship? And then have it. They had the first
but how
playoff was
often? Yeah, but
the
like
first
how
playoff. It was the very first time. Hey, let's add 4 teams, and the 4 seed with a third string quarterback won the national championship. So
well, I mean, Alabama also blew that game. I think if they play them 10 times, they win 9. But
and
I
then you have
mean,
Saban last year was pissed and thought he could not. Now I have different thoughts on whether or not they'd actually be able to accomplish that goal last year. But I'm going to be interested because as I'm doing my playoff preview for that we're going to have next week, I'll tell you it wasn't a very clear cut 4, and I don't even know if it was a
I
very
mean, I
clear
think
cut
it's
number
pretty
1. To be
clear
honest with
last
you,
year that Georgia and Ohio State were at that time the best 2 teams, right? Like, and that's another thing too that like the time off doesn't help because I think if the playoff would have happened right when the season ended, I think Michigan could have very well won the whole thing. Um, Sorry if that offends EJ, but I think that they
yep.
could have. Like, it's just that time off. It's hard to stay in the zone, and things change. Guys get healthy. You know, um, things that are bothering people get resolved and stuff like that. You have a whole month and a half to, well, like a month to prepare for it. Like,
I
I
also
don't know.
think, well, I also think what you would have if if you do this realignment without adding additional playoff spots, you're going to put these conferences, they're going to complain. They're going to be at a disadvantage. Now, mind you, the teams that survive the Big Ten and the SEC would likely be the champions anyway. But if you are a dog shit Big 12, like, so you're telling me that if, I don't know, uh, Texas Tech has an amazing year next year and wins a toothless Big 12, that they deserve to be there after Bama had to go to Athens, to Austin, host Oklahoma, host, you know what I mean? Like, you can start rattling off the schools that the SEC and the Big Ten have to play now on an annual basis, and then it's easy to get to 2 losses, and then you're
Well,
screwed.
well, first off, I think you're being awful disrespectful of the Texas Longhorns and Quinn Ewers in saying the Big 12 is toothless and that Texas Tech
No,
can
I
find a
said
path to
next year.
victory.
No, next year after the
Oh,
realignment.
oh, oh.
After the realignment.
My apologies. My
Yes.
apologies. Okay. Okay.
Yes. Or like the ACC champion getting it through, but like a 3-loss Big Ten
Well,
or
that's why there's a
SEC.
vote. That's why there's a vote. You
Yeah,
know?
but I don't know. I don't mind it because it'll end up playing itself out. If 12 through 8 don't belong, it'll be obvious, and that's fine, you know. But I think there'll be some 4 or some 5 and 6s in the first couple years that either
Sure.
get to the
I
national
mean,
championship or potentially even win it.
I remember a couple years ago. I forget when. I think it was like 2 years ago. Was it? TCU played in the Peach Bowl. I think they played Michigan, and they just absolutely routed them, like 65-17 or something like that. Am I on the right track there, or was it Kentucky they played?
South
So,
Carolina, Jadavian Clowney murdered a guy.
no, 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 no. Not that, not back with Clowney.
Okay.
I'm thinking like I'm recent history.
I
So
don't remember.
I'm gonna have to go
Florida?
back and look.
Mm,
Uh
Jim's only
could
won
be.
one
Yeah,
bowl
I think
game.
it was Florida. I think it was Florida. Hold on. Hold on.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I don't know. Again, I'm with you, but I'm hoping that a 12-team playoff will make the regular season better because schools you'll have a coach eventually, and it might be Saban, and Saban's already kind of done
Oh,
this.
sorry. Oh no, sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
Where it's just you're gonna be rewarded by playing a tougher schedule because then you'll be ready for the playoff versus playing no one, and then your first big opponent is an elimination game, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I think you're going to have a lot better of a regular season matchups and just overall quality because so many teams are going to, will have to now because they're in the conference together,
Yeah.
play each other. But you might have some of these non-conference games still look pretty good because it only beheaves you to do that. Like, throw my team in September at Lubbock and let them suffer
Behooves is
through
the
it.
word, by the way. Not
Behooves.
beheaves. Behooves.
Behooves. And let's see how they do. And they struggled, but now we know what it takes, right? Or you will play a crossover with another big conference. I don't know. I just think it'll be better because you can afford to lose 2 or 3 games and still get a shot.
Now let me throw this. No, I'm at the bottom of my second El Segundo Brewing Company, Steve Austin's Broken Skull IPA here. So I'm feeling pretty good. But let me throw this at you. Getting a little lost in the sauce. What do you think about this? I saw this on Twitter, X, whatever it is, the other day. What if they did it like the EPL, right? Where you have the Premier League, then you have the Champions League. That's how it goes, right? Premier's first, and then
Championship.
the championship. Is that below? I don't know exactly how it
Yes,
all works.
Champions League is like a world league.
Okay, so Premier League, Championship League. We have to
1 and
figure
2.
out that naming, something that works, and then like each is, and then you have relegation, right? Now the only way that works is for the NCAA to get out their fat ass and be like, listen, guys, this is how we're going to do it. And then if you are, it also solves the TV market thing,
Yeah.
because if you are NBC, ABC, CBS, ESPN, then you just bid on the rights to broadcast that league.
Mhm.
And then if you are a team, if you're in that league, then you automatically get that. If you're relegated, then you get the lower teams. And it like, then that solves the whole TV thing. It makes for some really compelling football because you are going to have the best of the best playing each other consistently. Um, I think that's like that would be the way to go. Like that would be an awesome way to have like, and it also when you look at like program building and the people worried about like transfer portal and things like that, if you're building something in a program, then there is like incentive that like if we get better, then we can move up to get more money. And now
Mhm.
you also have to consider, well, I think the NCAA should do, start profit sharing some of these TV things with the players.
Yeah, right. You know
I
how hard it
mean,
was for them to do NIL, let alone that. You're right. No, you're right. It's just I'll believe it when I
what's
see it.
right by the kids and
Yeah.
what's, you know, like what was ultimately the most compelling TV, I think, would be that type of scenario.
Yeah, I mean, really, if you think about it, you're not going to be disrupting as much as you think because, like, I mean, I don't know how big of a English soccer fan you are, but there aren't too many teams that have made meaningful runs that have dealt with promotion and relegation outside of Leicester City winning, the whole thing at like a plus 100,000 to begin the season. Like it's the highest odds, I think, like of any professional sport
Yeah.
to have to cash that out. But I think that's what you'd have. You'd have the blue bloods that have the money to stay, right? They will just never be bad enough because they have enough resources. But it allows you those Cinderella stories to get promoted. And you probably would still have a couple that would surprise every once in a while. But no, I agree with you. I think that I think if they end up getting to a point where it's really just like 40 schools, two conferences, 40 schools, AFC, NFC, NFL style, I think that makes sense because there's so many other schools clearly that can be added to
Yeah.
have a system like that. I
And
totally
then
agree
look
with
at
you.
like, you know, look at like Cincinnati or Boise
Mhm.
State
Yeah.
or, you know, help me out here. Who are some other Cinderellas that we've
Or
had in the past?
Oregon before Phil Knight.
Oregon.
Like I don't think people realize how
Yeah.
regional the University of Oregon was before they just happened to
Clemson.
have
Clemson
right.
even. Clemson would
Right.
have before Dabo, Clemson would have absolutely been in, I don't know, like two leagues below Champions League, probably. And then Dabo would have won the whole thing the first year, probably would have won the whole thing the next year, moved up again, then you're in champions, and then moved up to Premier.
I mean, where would Tennessee be right now? I mean, they had some pretty
Yeah.
lean years. Florida State's had some. I mean, at least they had a natty with Jimbo. It's been about a decade, but like
Yeah.
it makes you think like shit. 5-7 one year with some of Oklahoma last year. Michigan State's had that. Like
Yeah.
you could be in some trouble. You might have to
Yeah.
really earn your way back. I,
Absolutely.
I Texas
College
at
football is
times like
very, very cyclical.
yeah.
College football is very cyclical. Like,
I mean,
I
even
mean,
Bama before Saban,
yes,
right? Went through.
I was just gonna say that before Saban, Bama hit a bit of a rut in the 90s and
Yeah.
80s, you know? So like, I mean, it's definitely I think something that would be compelling and would play well to the cyclical nature of these college football programs. Nebraska for, you know, another
Yeah.
one. But like when you see those blue bloods moving down, teams like Cincinnati and what Luke Fickle did, teams like Boise State, you know, they can all kind of move up the ranks. You know, I think that would make for some really like that. Then there's real consequences they're tied to being successful year over year. Louisiana Tech, you know, that's another one that was hot last year, right? So
Tulane.
Tulane, love betting on Tulane. Like that'd be a lot of fun, very
No,
compelling, I think.
and I think it could. That's probably the only American league that you could do that with because
Mm-hmm.
there's so many schools,
Yep.
right? Just like there's
Yep.
so many English
Yep.
soccer teams.
And then you also don't, because you want to keep the season short, right? Like, I think that even a 12 team playoff does impact these kids, and like adding that many, like, football's a tough sport. Adding that many extra games is tough, you know.
Yeah.
Like even adding two, bowl games that you have to play if you're going to the playoffs, right now. I think that's like, you don't have to have that extended 12 team playoff. You just have in the Premier League a 4 team playoff, because you're playing the best of the best, right? The true cream will rise to the top, and you have a 14 playoff to sort out at the end. So
Yeah,
I think that that's
it'd be interesting to see how they would schedule that, because like that's the thing with the English Premier League. It's so small that like you play everyone, right? So you do, there
Mhm.
isn't the, well, you had an easy schedule because you played, you didn't play X school this year, or you had this
play them
side of the
all.
conference,
Play
right?
if you do a 12 team or what, if you do it, what would you have to do? Because if you do 12 teams in each conference, then yeah, you have a 12-week season. You could do 14 teams and have a 14-week season
Yeah.
with a bye week.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're going to get to a point where this isn't going to stop. I mean, I think there's going to be a lull for now because the ACC can't, those schools can't get out. All the small schools want to add Stanford and Cal just for the sake of keeping Florida State and Clemson, like to try. I bet you there'd be like some sort of contract negotiation that
Yeah.
like lock them in. That's the only really way, because they're adding two more schools, especially with not a, I mean, San Francisco is a fine market. I like I said, I think it's like 15. It's not super. It's not one of the top five, but it you're not adding any football revenue, so it just be the TV market, and even that, like you're still splitting for another 10 years. That 17 million goes down to like say 13. Like, so I can
Yeah.
understand why some of these other schools are like, hell no, we're not dragging along a couple more schools. Like, I want to make my 100 million. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting because something's gonna have to give. I don't know if the ACC, I think that's gonna, I'm not say die, but they're gonna lose those two schools the second that those schools are able to leave. So um so then it's a matter of, yeah, do they just find some missing pieces, and the Big 12 looks like they're stable for now, like maybe we just go on with four for a bit. I mean, I think that's better than just being in two.
Yeah.
um
Well, yeah. I don't know.
it's
Well,
it's coming down the pipe. That's the thing. It's like
yeah.
it's inevitable. It's not, this isn't theoretical anymore.
It's
It's gonna
Thanos.
happen. Yeah.
It's Thanos. It's inevitable. I'm looking through some tweets here to kind of round this out, because there were some funny things. Here actually, EJ, this is the one I wanted to share earlier. 13 years ago, the Pac-10 had the richest media deal in the sport and very nearly became the first 16-team conference consisting of 3 blue bloods and many other marquee programs. In the long run, not even the SEC is safe. That's from Reddit CFB. I mean, that was the point I was making earlier, right? I mean, it feels like how foolish will we be to say that the SEC isn't safe, but like, you know, uh in related to Cal and their debt that they have, Roger Sherman at Roger on Twitter. Can a college athletic program fake its own death and flee to South America to leave under a pseudonym? I thought that was pretty funny. Uh very, very interesting point here is that the Big 12 is adding some very cool places to play. Like when you look at BYU, Utah, Cincinnati, and Colorado, their stadiums, striking landscape. Very, very cool place to play. I think Utah at night is a great place to play. Again, I encourage everyone to check out pack4.com. That's pack-4.com. Some NCAA teams are right here in the Pac-4. That's their tagline. Incredible. Let's see what else we got here. I
Yeah, I
shared the
mean,
chart.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see some of these new matchups. I mean, the one thing that's gained out of this is Utah and BYU is a big rivalry that doesn't always get played since they've split conferences. And slowly they're two, both of them are two programs that were very small that have built their way up to where they're at now. So at least we get to see that on an annual basis, because Provo is also a tough place to play. You have the elevation there,
Yes.
just south of Salt Lake, and in a pretty rabid fan base for the Cougars there, because Utah doesn't have a ton of other sports going on. So no, you're right,
Well,
and obviously
speaking
Nippert
speaking
Stadium.
speaking of Washington State, Kirk Schultz, the president, did release a statement on August 7th. He said, "I genuinely felt that on Friday morning we would sign the needed paperwork, finalize the deal with Apple, and move the Pac-12 forward to a new and brighter future." That's just sad. That's just, I mean, like a lot of these people were. Now, at the same time, also on August 7th in the morning, Brett McMurphy tweeted out, um, following last Tuesday's meeting with the commissioner of the Pac 12, George Kliavkoff,
Yeah.
a Pac 12 president contacted a Big 12 president and asked that the Big 12 would take all 9 of us except for Oregon State and Washington State. So you got one guy saying, like, yeah, we're going to ink this thing, it's going to be done. And you got another guy saying, hey, uh, can you take all of us except for these two guys? I mean,
But
that's
those
like
are the
the
two best. That's what I was. So for the listeners here, as this saga's been going on, and especially as I've been preparing for our college football preview, I haven't realized how much I love the Pac-12 until now. And
thank you.
I hate that I'm loving it in its final year, because I've just gotten to know how much of a trap Pullman is, or trap. And that's why they don't want him to go. People losing
Oh
Corvallis
yeah.
and Pullman, even if those teams are terrible.
Oh yeah.
So you
Tough
just
places to
have,
play.
it's
Tough
like
place to play.
I'm looking forward to watching like Oregon not at 10 o'clock. Like if they want to play Rutgers at 10:35, that's fine.
That's gonna be
It's
great.
gonna happen.
That's gonna be
That's
awesome.
But like give me Oregon at like big noon kickoff. I'm in. Like
Imagine these Guidos from Rutgers showing up for a 1:30 a.m. Easter, like their bodies are on Easter time still.
yeah,
1:30 a.m. kickoff. Could you imagine kicking off a football game at 1:30? Like, what do you do to prepare for that? Like you are just
we're about to find out.
you're screwed. Yeah, we are about to. It's gonna be great. It's
Or
gonna be
like
great.
have USC come to the Horseshoe in November, winner goes to the Big Ten championship. Like,
Yeah.
yes. Or have Ohio State be playing in 100 degrees in Los Angeles in September. Like, I'm in. I
What
think I think there's gonna be, you add, the Coliseum can be big but not noisy, but you're definitely adding, Outson is very loud, and it's actually not very big. It's only 55,000.
yeah,
Which
yeah.
again just shows you how regional Oregon was. And even Seattle, like the Husky Stadium's a pretty good crowd when they're good too. So
Well, they have like the equivalent of like Tennessee. Like they got all the boats pulled up, they got their navy or whatever they call it.
yacht
But
gating.
yacht gating, yes.
Yes, it is.
Um
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It'll be fun. It'll be fun to see these Pac-12 schools realize how much of a pain in the ass it is to go to Iowa or Wisconsin, like, or Nebraska, even, like that the team sucks, but the fans are selling
Rabid.
out
That's
and
the
rabid.
opposite
Yeah,
opposite of what they're seeing, right?
right.
Is that like, yeah,
They got a
like
couple tough
when we
spots,
suck,
right?
no one's here.
Right.
But gosh darn it, Iowa's putting up 13 points a game and the stadium's packed. Like
Yeah.
that's gonna be now. Here's an interesting one. EJ, this is for you. Roger Sherman again. RODGER Sherman at Roger RODGER. Conference realignment. I think he was tweeting this on. This might be your burner account for all I know.
Okay.
Conference realignment has made me a radicalized Oregon State, Washington State fan. I am moving to the woods of the Pacific Northwest to join the Cascadia separatist movement and spread the gospel of Jacques Rogers. That I like cackled because just like Jacquizz Rogers, like what a callback, like what a
Yeah.
force he was at Oregon State.
Yep.
And like just so good. Like you could do it, man. You and I could both do it. I have the long hair still. You cut yours, grow it back out. I've seen you do it. We'll keep the beards going. We'll just live up in the woods in the Pacific Northwest and just say, my man, have you heard of Mike Leach? Have you heard of Jacquizz Rogers? Let me tell you. And we already have a flag, Old Crimson. We're all set.
Just wait till next week. There are a couple things I just couldn't help myself with.
Brother, if I swear to God, Caleb Williams is a Heisman favorite, and you're really gonna pick against the Trojans.
I am gonna gladly and pretty easily pick against the Trojans.
This is gonna be the easiest money I ever won, folks. Easy money. If you're taking Oregon State or Wazoo to win the pack, easy money.
Guess we'll just have to see.
Guess we will.
We'll have to see what both of us come up with, and then what it ultimately becomes. But I'm telling you, my playoff 4 are not going to be your playoff 4. I would be shocked if they are. I don't think they're not going to be radical. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to have plenty of reasons why, but it's going to buck. It's going to buck some traditions here.
Based on what you've said today, I'm already predicting Texas Tech is the 3 seed. Sounds like Oregon State maybe is the undefeated Oregon State is the 1 seed. And
have you seen that offensive line?
You'll probably pick Michigan to say you're not a homer, and I don't know, maybe Georgia. You won't go too crazy on me, but then you throw in a couple curveballs.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what your thoughts are.
Right now, it feels very chalky. I'll say that. I'm through 2.5 conferences. It feels very chalky. So I don't know. I'm boring. I got a kid now. I'm boring.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too, pal. Let me leave you and the listeners with this. Do you have anything else? And I'll give a closing thought.
No.
Bear mauls cougar. Cougar eats beaver. Beaver gnaws down tree. Tree falls on bear. Some people are saying the Pac-12 is dead, but they still have an entire circle of life left in them. Courtesy of the college football Reddit, Twitter, but I just too good to pass up. It's a circle. It's not a square.
I see it. I see the circle.
Circle.
We got it. Well, R.I.P. the Pac-12. It was too soon. I was just getting to know you, but I'm excited for the new potential, and I really hope that Oregon and Wazoo just give college football the biggest middle finger this year. I can't wait.
How do I say goodbye, baby? Oh, they were good. Oh, sing it, Boys to Men. Sing it. I thought be there to be forever, but forever's gone away. It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday.
And that's a good thing that this is towards the end of the episode, so it's going to be really hard to hear that with our outro music that we typically dub over.
We should talk about some other things here. Delay for the outro music, but just I can't pass up an opportunity for Boys to Men. I cannot do it. Motown Philly's back again. I can't do it.
So with that being said, I'm excited for this season. I'm excited to kind of see these conferences, in their last stages of what they
Yes.
currently look like, because next year is just going to be a completely different landscape with just where teams are
I think we're
located,
just getting started. I think we're
with
just
the
getting
playoff
started.
expanded. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be completely different. It's going to be the most different we've had, like the biggest difference that we've had, probably ever since the playoffs started. So a solid
Yeah.
at least 10 years, right? So,
Oh yeah, for sure.
so it'd be good. But yeah, so please check out our or just make sure you follow us on Instagram at whiskers.whiskies, because you need to keep on top of all of the episodes that we are going to throw at you. Next week we will be doing our college football preview and our competition between each other. It sounds like Mike thinks he's going to win, and I can't wait to
You
check
pick
the
Oregon State.
receipts.
If you pick Oregon State or Wazoo in the playoffs, brother, I'll feel excellent. I feel excellent about my chances.
So we have that coming down the pike, and then right after that, Tales of the Trophy. So please check out our website, whiskerswhiskies.com. We will post our college football preview brackets once we complete them. That is also a place where you can see all of our past podcast episodes, and as well as our home field advantage travel guide. So for Mike, I'm EJ. Always remember, too much of anything is bad, but too much good whiskey is barely enough.
Cheers, boys.